Hi, hello, I'm Hope, and I hope you're all doing well today. Today we'll be reading ProRevenge stories, and the first one is called The HOA President's Long Goodbye, posting on behalf of a friend who isn't on Reddit. This is for you, Jake. When I moved into my suburban neighborhood, I expected peace and quiet. Instead, I walked into a petty dictatorship run by our HOA president, Todd. Todd was the worst kind of leader, the kind who loved power but hated accountability. He enforced ridiculous rules like fining people $200 for leaving their trash cans out a minute past 9 a.m., but blatantly ignored the rules when it suited him. His own yard was a mess of unpermitted structures, and his fence was taller than allowed by city ordinances. But Todd's true sin? Using the HOA as his personal piggy bank. Yikes, that's really bad. I hope he got what he deserved by the end of the story, so let's continue reading it. At first, I tried reasoning with him. My fence was slightly off color because the approved stain wasn't available, and he fined me $500. I explained, provided receipts, and asked for leniency. Todd smirked and said, "Rules are rules," and walked away. That's when I decided I would take him down. Not with screaming or public arguments, but methodically, legally, and in a way he'd never recover from. Step 1. Become the inside man. Todd's first mistake was underestimating me. I volunteered for the HOA board under the guise of wanting to get involved in the community. I played the part of an eager, naive newbie perfectly. For 2 years, I attended every meeting, quietly observing how Todd operated. I learned how he controlled the board by bullying other members and burying them in paperwork. He'd push votes through when only his allies were present and conveniently lose paperwork submitted by dissenting homeowners. I kept my head down, took detailed notes, and waited. My goal was to outlast his term as president so I could begin making changes. Then I discovered Todd's second mistake. He wasn't just a bully, he was a thief. Step 2. Follow the money. Todd loved to brag about how he kept HOA's finances in order, but something didn't add up. The annual HOA fees were high, much higher than in similar neighborhoods. But the common areas were falling apart. The pool was closed half the summer due to maintenance issues, and landscaping looked like it hadn't been touched in months. Okay, this already sounds suspicious. High fees, but no work being done? Okay, anyhow, I started digging. As the HOA treasurer, Todd had access to all the accounts, but he was notoriously cagey about sharing financial details. I asked for the budget during the meeting and Todd laughed it off, saying, "Don't worry, I've got it under control." I filed a formal request for the financial records, which, under HOA rules, he was required to provide. Weeks went by with no response. That's when I started talking to the neighbors. Turns out I wasn't the only one suspicious. Over a dozen homeowners had requested access to the budget over the years, only to be ignored. One neighbor claimed Todd had used HOA funds to install a new patio at his house, while another swore that he's seen Todd's kids at a community pool during its maintenance closure. Armed with these suspicions, I filed a formal complaint to the HOA board, forcing Todd to provide the records. He stalled, but I wasn't backing down. Step 3. Build the case. When Todd finally handed over the financial documents, they were a mess. Invoices were missing, payments were mislabeled, and some expenses were downright bizarre. A $50,000 landscaping fee paid to a company that didn't exist. Thousands spent on administrative costs with no explanation. I cross-referenced the HOA's bank statements with public records and found the smoking gun. Todd was funneling money to his personal accounts. Even better, I discovered Todd had been inflating contractor fees, pocketing the difference, and splitting the profits with his buddy, a shady contractor who handled most of the HOA's maintenance. I compiled everything into a detailed report, complete with spreadsheets, photos, and notarized statements from the neighbors who had seen Todd's ending firsthand. Ah, yes. A good old classic. I paid myself with your money, but I made it look legit. Step 4. The coup. I waited for the annual HOA meeting, which was typically a snooze fest attended by only a handful of homeowners. But this time, I made sure people showed up. I spent weeks knocking on doors, explaining what Todd had been up to. I didn't share everything, just enough to get people angry and curious. On the night of the meeting, the room was packed. Todd started the meeting as usual, droning about how difficult it was to manage the HOA and how much he'd sacrificed for the community. That's when I stood up. I calmly asked if he could explain the discrepancies in the budget. Todd laughed nervously and said, "I don't think this is the time or place." I replied, "Actually, Todd, this is the perfect time." I handed out copies of my report to everyone in the room. The mood shifted instantly. People started reading, whispering, and then shouting. Todd tried to regain control, but it was too late. I called for a vote to remove him as the president. By the end of the night, Todd was out. Step 5. The final blow. After Todd was removed, we hired an independent auditor to go through the HOA's finances. They had confirmed everything. Todd has embezzled over $50,000, mismanaged tens of thousands more, and committed multiple accounts of fraud. We reported him to the police and filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds. But it didn't end there. Todd's shady contractor buddy was also exposed and banned from doing business in the county. Todd had to sell his house and pay restoration and legal fees. His name became a running joke in the neighborhood, and no one would touch him professionally. With Todd gone, we restructured the HOA to prevent another dictator from taking over. We implemented term limits, required multiple board members to approve financial decisions, and created an online portal so all homeowners could access budgets and meeting minutes. Look, I'm still not a big fan of HOAs, but at very least, if there is one, it's nice to hear you made it run as it should. The aftermath. Every time I walk past Todd's house, now owned by a lovely family, I smile. The pool is open, the landscaping is beautiful, and the HOA's fees are lower than ever. Todd, meanwhile, moved to a neighboring town, where he reportedly tried to join another HOA board, only to be laughed out of the room when someone googled his name. Justice wasn't just served, it was plated, garnished, and savored. As it should be. Okay, I can already feel just by reading the title, this one is going to be a good one. And it's called Tricking My Slacker Coworker into Sabotaging Himself. I work in an office with a guy I call Seth. Seth is that coworker everyone knows. Lazy, always passing his work onto someone else, and somehow always getting away with it. He'll sit around on his phone or go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. He's the kind of guy who will show up late, make some excuse about traffic, and then disappear for lunch for 2 hours. For the past 6 months, Seth's favorite target has been me. He'll send emails asking if I can help out with a project, but what he really means is do all the work while he takes the credit. I complained to my boss a couple of times, but somehow Seth always managed to weasel out his way out of trouble. The final straw came when he passed off a major report that was due to a client in 2 days, dumping it on me last minute. One day I casually asked him if he was good with Excel, and he admitted he didn't know much about it. Perfect. The next time Seth tried to dump a bunch of spreadsheets on me to organize for this next report, I agreed. But this time, I embedded a series of hidden formulas into the documents. These formulas didn't do anything important, just enough to mess with the numbers if someone didn't know how to check for the hidden cells. It took me a little time, but I was careful not to make it too obvious. The kicker? Every time Seth tried to copy and paste the data into his report, it would scramble everything just enough to be completely useless. On the day the report was due, Seth slacked off as usual, assuming I had handled it, like always. When the client called, furious because the report was filled with nonsense numbers, Seth panicked. He rushed to fix it, but every time he tried to fix one part of the report, something else would break. He came to me fronting and asked for help. I acted confused and said, "Oh, I don't know what happened, maybe it's a glitch." I gave him some vague advice and watched as he spent the entire day trying to salvage his mess. Okay, this is so savage but deserved. Our boss found out, and for once, Seth couldn't talk his way out of it. He got lambasted for screwing up such an important project, and he was put on a temporary leave without pay. I guess he'll be doing his own work from now on. Our last story is quite long, so in the meantime you can like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Alright, let's read it. Not going to pay me overtime? Think again. I was discussing this subreddit with a good friend and he said, "Boy, have I got a story that'll fit." It wasn't his story, but his brother, and I sat with him and he got the details. Buckle up, it's a good one, and a long one. Let's call him Bob. Bob has been fiddling with computers ever since he was a kid and knows them pretty well. As with most IT people, he moved from job to job. The employer he worked for was a service/distribution company, and there were 2 IT employees. The company was located in Ontario, Canada. About 3 years ago, Bob's employer decided to modernize their software. They had separate programs for dispatching, for inventory, for payroll, and finances, and it was a complicated moving information from one program to the other. They decided to get an ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, program, and Bob recommended one that he knew inside out from a previous employer. For those of you who don't know, an ERP program handles everything. Purchase orders, sales, inventory, personnel, vendors, customers, all of it. You can run a report and find out which customer had bought the most parts, ABC, in the last year, which salesman had improved their numbers the most, which vendor had the fastest delivery time, which shipper packed the most orders. Everyone in the company used the ERP program, but it was very complicated, and they used the aspects of it that related to their position. For example, the receiver would accept a shipment, verify the quantity, confirm it was received, and the inventory stats would be available for the salespeople if they wanted to look up how many were on hand. The receiver didn't care what the price was or who the vendor was. They just did their job. Bob was run ragged during the implementation process, but he managed to train most of the employees on their aspects, and after a few months, everything was running fairly smoothly. Bob still got tickets for tweaks in the operation of the software and occasional hardware IT issues. Then the company decided to expand their footprint and was marketing into different time zones. That messed everything up. Atlantic Canada is 90 minutes early, so if someone sent an email or an order at 8 a.m. their time, it would arrive at 6:30 a.m. Ontario time. Pacific Canada is 3 hours late, so an email sent at 3 p.m. Vancouver time would arrive at 6 p.m. This stretched out the day, so many staff came in early and worked late. Bob would arrive at 8 a.m. and there would be people that demanded his immediate assistance and were annoyed that he didn't respond instantly, even though the request was submitted before his start time. Same with late in the day. His phone would ring at dinner time with people that wanted his help right now. They decided to stagger his and his IT colleagues' shift times. Bob would start at 6 a.m. and work till 2:30, and his colleague would start at 10 a.m. and work till 7 p.m. Bob's colleague had kids and refused the shift change. The employer insisted. The colleague quit. That meant Bob was the only person in the IT department. The employer said that they would look to hire a new IT guy, but they had trouble finding one that knew the ERP system, and they were offering well under a market value salary. Bob asked for a raise and was denied. Then he wanted overtime, and the employer told him that as an IT specialist, he was exempt from overtime laws in Ontario. Bob looked it up, and the employer was correct. This went on for some time, and he knew lots of IT people socially. They told him what the company was offering, and Bob knew they wouldn't find another tech. Things went downhill from there. Bob would get chewed out if he missed a call or an email, no matter what time it came in. He had to train new hires in the ERP systems, as well as take care of the hardware. He asked repeatedly for better compensation, and he was denied. So he planned to get a new job. Now here's the revenge. Bob had access to the entirety of the ERP system. When the user signed in, the time was logged, and even if they didn't sign out, after 15 minutes it would log them out anyway. Everyone in the company was on salary, and many of them came in early and stayed late. Ontario labor law stated that even salaried workers are entitled to overtime after 44 hours a week, unless they were managers or supervisors. So Bob jumped into the program and ran a report for each employee that wasn't a manager, all the way back to when the ERP program was started. Then he reached out to an employment lawyer and got the okay to refer employees to him. Bob lined up another job, and after he left, every employee in the company got an email with an Excel sheet showing the hours they had put in past 44 hours a week. The subject line said, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay." In the body of the email was lawyer's name. The shit hit the fan. Almost every employee authorized the lawyer to negotiate with the company on their behalf, and the company had to pay a ton of money. All the company had to do was pay Bob for the extra work he put in. Instead, they had to pay almost everyone. Honestly, it doesn't feel so much of a revenge story, more so just getting what they were legally obligated to. But hey, I love it nonetheless. I mean, who knows how long this company would have kept on getting away with it if it weren't for Bob. Click on the screen to watch a video all about malicious compliance. And thank you for watching this video. With your help, I'll be back in hell in no time.